Welcome to a Monday midday edition of Hurricane Hunt. I'm meteorologist Joe Martucci. Joined with me, my weather brother Sean Sublett. Hope you all had a good weekend. We said in the last Hurricane Hunt things will get busy in a hurry, and it certainly has. Early this week, we have two hurricanes, or at least potential hurricanes, to worry about. Sean, what's going on?
Yeah, the first one is Franklin, which is actually the stronger of the two storms. Ironically, that's not the one we really need to focus on. Idalia is the one that we need to focus on, not just for now, but going forward in these next few days or so for sure.
Yeah. So, just to tell you what we're going to talk about here in this episode, we're going to talk about Hurricane Franklin, how it remains offshore. Then we have Idalia, which is becoming a hurricane, currently a tropical storm when we're recording this, but it will become a hurricane more than likely some point on Monday, and it will impact Florida later this week. So, we have a look at our satellites right now. Sean, what are we seeing?
Yeah, so those are the two systems, Franklin and Idalia. So Franklin is a category 4 storm. Normally, we'd be more worried about that, but that's going to kind of miss both Bermuda and the East Coast, then ultimately head out to the North Atlantic. We'll get to that in a minute. Idalia is still taking shape right there between Mexico and Cuba, what we call the Yucatan Channel. It is going to begin to accelerate into the Gulf of Mexico in the next 24 hours, and we full on expect this to become a serious hurricane in that time. But let's kind of put Franklin to bed. It still has some impacts, doesn't it,
Yeah,
Joe?
it certainly does. I mean, up and down the East Coast, we're talking about swells, rip currents, coastal flooding. I know I'm here in Jersey. We're talking about a couple days of coastal flooding to come. But what it's going to do, it's moving to the north now, and it's actually going to go around Bermuda. So, good news for them. It's going to get driven around the Bermuda high pressure, which spins clockwise and is going to make this storm go in a clockwise shape. But it does become a very strong hurricane. It is now and will continue to do so even until Wednesday. It's going to be a major hurricane. That's an either category 3, 4, or 5 hurricane. And it still remains hurricane strength all the way up to the same latitude as Nova Scotia. So this is a strong storm now. It's still going to remain strong for its latitude as it kind of rides along the Gulf Stream over the next couple of days here. But let's talk about Idalia because that is the one that is really going to bring direct impacts to land.
Yeah, it really started to take shape over the weekend. And right now, it's still a very strong tropical storm, meaning its strongest sustained winds are running at 65 miles per hour. The presentation on the satellite is not very impressive. It's not a symmetrical storm, at least not just yet. But as it begins to move north in these next 24 hours, it's in a very favorable area for rapid development. So as we think ahead toward Tuesday night into Wednesday, a strong category 2 or more likely category 3 storm is going to be making landfall somewhere in Florida. Right now, the best guess is somewhere between Apalachicola and metropolitan Tampa Bay. So, unlike Ian from a year ago, we have a lot better confidence that this is not going to be turning back into Fort Myers. They're not out of the woods entirely yet, but we think this is going to take a much more northerly track. With that in mind, we're very concerned about obviously heavy rain, strong damaging winds, but storm surge. Remembering that the winds around a hurricane are in the counterclockwise position or direction. So that's effectively going to be dragging the Gulf of Mexico into that kind of concave geography, geometry of the Big Bend of Florida, northward from Tampa and back toward Panama City. So we're looking at several feet of storm surge in that part of Florida. Then once it leaves Florida, it's still going to be a heavy rainmaker for the Eastern Carolinas, going to, let's say, Wednesday night, Thursday, probably heading back offshore first thing on Friday morning. So for Charleston, Myrtle Beach, Wilmington, all the way up to the Outer Banks, there's going to be heavy rain to contend with and some strong onshore winds. So this is not the best week to be at the Carolina coast at all. You're going to have two systems to deal with, one indirect and one more directly. But again, bigger concern right now is in Florida, Joe. I think
Yeah.
the Hurricane Center has put up warnings now, correct?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, let's get to it and let's show you what's going on. We'll show you a zoom out of Idalia first with the track, and now we'll go into the hurricane warnings. And this is in effect from about Bradenton, Florida. That's on the south side of the Tampa Bay, all the way through Tampa into what we call the Big Bend of Florida. Now, there's not a lot of people in the Big Bend of Florida, but of course, It only takes one storm over your house for this to be an impactful hurricane season. So it doesn't necessarily matter if there's a lot of people or not a lot of people. It's still going to impact people here. And we are talking about hurricane warnings, and there have been evacuations ordered as well for this. Now, we take a look at our sea surface temperatures here, and, Gulf of Mexico is really just a bath right now, right, Sean?
Yeah, it is that time of year between now and as we get into early October where the water is the warmest. And ideally to get storms to develop, you want the water 77, 78, 79 degrees or warmer through, a good depth of the ocean, a good 100 feet, couple 100 feet. And that's easily the case here. The other thing to note, in addition to the warm water, the amount of shear or how the winds change direction with height, that is going to be lessening over the next couple of days. And that's also going to unfortunately create almost ideal conditions for this storm to take shape very rapidly and strengthen, Joe. So I think everybody needs to be very mindful and pay attention to very small changes in the potential track because, as we've said before, it's not a full-on hurricane just yet. The computer simulations, while very good, will be better once it becomes a legit hurricane, has a closed circulation, and the models can get a better handle on it. Nonetheless, there's very high confidence that Florida is going to get a hurricane.
Hey, Sean,
So take us, yeah, man.
yeah, I was going to ask you a question here, because I know, you're in Virginia, of course, and you're watching the Carolinas. If that hurricane, if Idalia does stay on the eastern side of the cone, though, it's still
Mhm.
going to go over some very warm water. I mean, you see those dark reds right off the
Yeah.
Carolinas there. I mean, is there a potential it stays into a hurricane as it goes off the coast? If it goes off the coast and stays,
Yeah.
instead of staying into inland South Carolina and inland North Carolina, it stays just offshore.
Yeah, I think that's certainly an option that is on the table. It will weaken a little bit as it does traverse Florida and Georgia and then reemerge off the Atlantic coast. But the other thing is that the forward speed is pretty quick. So it does get out pretty quickly. Nonetheless, even if you only have 6 hours worth of a storm, you've got 6 hours worth of a storm.
Yeah.
So we do think it's almost certainly going to be a hurricane when it hits Florida. And whether you I wouldn't focus too much on the nomenclature. It's a hurricane versus tropical storm. There's going to be a lot of onshore wind. There's going to be heavy rain. There's going to be high surf, and there's going to be at least some coastal flooding along the Carolina coastline. But as you said, Joe, we're really just getting into the heart of the season now, right?
Yeah, I mean, we said at the top, hurricane season is certainly here. When you look at climatology, we're near the peak. I mean, the peak is about September the 10th. We're really close to that now. We said a couple of hurricane hunts ago, oh my gosh, it's so quiet, it's so quiet, it's so quiet. Just give us some time. Hurricane season usually does its thing once you get into late August and into September. And that's certainly the case here. So to wrap it up, Sean, I'll turn it over to you and then we'll
Yeah.
get on out of here for everybody.
Yeah, Franklin is a major hurricane, but it does remain offshore. Nonetheless, at the Carolina coast, all the way down toward really the east coast of Florida, heavy surf, high waves, and rip currents. Idalia, excuse me, Idalia is still going to become a hurricane in the next 24 hours, and that will be impacting Florida in the next 48 hours or so. We've already got the hurricane warnings in effect from Tampa Bay all the way back up to the Big Bend. Heavy surf, coastal flooding, high winds, the category 3 type storm. So this is what everybody needs to be prepared for in that part of Florida.
Yep. And this is how we're going to cover it. We'll keep putting out hurricane hunts, probably on a daily basis
Yeah. We'll
through
be
the
back tomorrow for
time
sure.
of. I'm sorry, Sean.
So we'll be back tomorrow for
Yeah, yeah.
sure.
We'll definitely be back tomorrow to be doing another hurricane hunt on this. Sean is also doing some specific region wide videos. So if you're in Virginia or you're in the Carolinas, look for a more specific update from him there. And then on your favorite newsroom website, we'll be giving you full coverage of this storm as well as it comes into Florida here. So stay safe. And thanks for watching Hurricane Hunt. For Sean Sublett, I'm Joe Martucci. We will talk with you on Tuesday.